Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to the Dope Muslim Woman podcast. This is your girl, Sabria Mills, the host and the facilitator of the Dope Muslim Woman podcast, a podcast that has been running for 7 seasons straight, about 4.5 years. I'm happy to be at this place. As you guys come on to the podcast, I need to feel your love. I need to see you. I need to hear your salams, because this is going to be a show. This is a heavy podcast. And I mentioned in some of the promotions that this is personal. Like this is a personal show. This is something that's really close to my heart. The sister who we're going to have on, who I'm going to be really proud to introduce shortly, the work that she's put out there, that is absolutely top grade, phenomenal. Alhamdulillah, I was able to see it before it came out. Not all of it, but I was able to contribute a bit to it. And so this is just a very real conversation. Wa alaikum salam. Hey, everybody. It's good to see you. Share the podcast. We are live, hopefully, inshallah, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I would like for somebody to check and make sure we are live on Instagram for me, because it would be the first time that and so we got to see if StreamYard is working with us. Okay, you guys. So this is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Our guest is backstage. She is here. I'm going to introduce her shortly, inshallah. How we're opening up this show is I wanted to share a story, if it's okay with you guys, before we bring on our guests. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for holding space. Continue to share the podcast. We appreciate you deeply. Bismillah. I guess she thought it would be like before. You know, a relationship that has arguments, ebbs and flows, good times and bad times. So when she began to slowly notice a change in behavior that didn't make sense, she did what she felt was normal for her. She had been in healthy relationships before that had began and ended, so she navigated this the same. She asked questions. She let her partner know that she didn't appreciate certain behavior, until the behavior was so peculiar and so different than what she had experienced from the beginning. It was just too far. She's told him that this was just too much and that she felt like it was time to leave. As she packed her bags and moved towards the door, she saw which was once loving, caring eyes turn to cold, dark eyes. I mean, really dark eyes. The eyes were so dark that she could no longer see the white that was once clearly visible in her partner. She only saw these dark, cold eyes peering at her. Those cold eyes soon matched the cold arms that lunged for her throat as she attempted to pull her carry-on luggage through the front door of her mother's apartment. Frightened for her life, she pulled her body away and began to run from him. He chased her with his fragile mother following behind him. She tried to pull him off of her. He aggressively pushed past his own mother to lunge at what he once called his loving wife. You see, he wasn't always like this. In fact, in the words of his imam, he was the most reliable brother in the masjid. He was there for every prayer. He held down security and fed the poor. The community called him the good brother. She believed every reference and every good word, as he could only talk about tahajjud prayer, women's rights, and his journey to Islam in the beginning. In the beginning, she would always find him praying and reading the Quran. You see, she never believed he was perfect, because she sure wasn't. She knew their journey together would involve a lot of work and sincerity. But she was willing. She never conceived that he actually stopped praying a long time before they met, was addicted to drugs and sex, and was physically abusive to the people in his life. She would only discover this after her wedding night, when all the guests returned home to their lives, raving about how lucky she was. Now she sits nursing her black eye and busted lip, asking God for a way out. Filled with shame and blame, she began reaching out for help. She asked the same imam who recommended him, as he had a 30-year track record of being a leader of a well-known community. He is well respected and knowledgeable. He shakes his head after hearing what happened and said he wondered why the brother's ex-wife was desperate to get divorced from him. He always wondered if something happened, but he figured was typical woman stuff. He looked sympathetically at the young sister and said there wasn't much he could do, and she should be careful not to make her husband too angry. He asked her if she found proper grounds for divorce, she could come back. This story, we're going to say to be continued. So I wanted to welcome you to A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum. Uh-oh, you're on mute.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you?
I'm great. It's so good to have you here. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce you. Thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you for the invite.
All right. Without further ado, everyone, I wanted to officially introduce our beloved guest. This is Sister Kaleema, and she's a federal policy analyst specializing in healthcare policy and disaster relief programs. She has managed programs for the Centers for Disease Control, Bioterrorism and International AIDS Relief, the U.S. Department of Commerce manufacturing programs, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services pediatric mental health, just to name a few. After 23 years, she retired from the federal government and is now working as a consultant to the National Science Foundation, overseeing research compliance. Kaleema has just written her first book, Hidden in Plain Sight. This book was written in real time and became an organic step to healing from the psychological trauma of abandonment. Her book includes a series of interviews with women from diverse racial, social, economic, and religious backgrounds. Kaleema's own journey included lodging a public complaint that resulted in an invitation to write a 7-series newspaper column. Kaleema's book exposes the grooming process that leads to psychological, economic, and spiritual abuse. She has a passion for volunteerism and co-hosts an interfaith radio show that promotes community involvement. Welcome to the show, Sister Kaleema.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Well, it's really, really good to see you. I really appreciate this. And I'm going to give a quick disclaimer because I know how it can be on my platform. So we have a variety, and Sister Kaleema, this is not necessarily for you, this is for my audience, because
Okay.
I'm seeing some comments. We have a variety of different perspectives, different podcasts, and different shows. We had about 3 shows from the brother's perspective over the past couple of weeks.
Okay.
So this right now, we're going to honor this story. And I know that what happens a lot of times, we're quick to be defensive, like, well, women do it too. We understand that. We're not saying that doesn't happen. So we want everyone to just be present for, what we're about to discuss. If, it's applicable on both sides. However, this particular research was done with women, and these stories do matter. So I do just want to start off by cooling people's tails a little bit, inshallah, and hopefully we can open up our hearts and minds to this conversation. Right? Alhamdulillah. Sister Kaleema, do you get that a bit when talking about your book? Like, wait a minute, what about the women who are hidden in plain sight?
Yes. And I have gotten, some brothers who say you should have included men. And I said, if I included all that I did with women and included men, it would be too massive to read in one sitting. But I hope that a brother will, take the torch and write, something similar for men, so that would be nice to see. If a brother would pick up that mantle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we know it happens on both sides. Just to kind of. Okay. So Sister Kaleema, mashallah, you wrote an incredible book. So we're going to get into the book and why you wrote the book. But I want to start off with this definition that I pulled out of a charlatan. So a charlatan, based on, a definition that I found in Webster's, is a person practicing quackery or a similar confidence trick in order to obtain money, power, fame, or other advantages through pretense or deception.
Mhm.
So I wanted to first ask you a little bit about why has it become easy, at least from my perspective, to hide unhealthy and dangerous character traits in religion? Like religion becomes this mask that people hide behind.
Mhm.
Why has that become easier over time? Or has it even become easier? What have you noticed about that?
I would say that it's probably easier, you know, when people are so transient, like throughout communities. And, sometimes, people will move from one community to the next. They may have multiple families, or even in Islam, if they do have multiple families, which I'm not speaking against that, and it's easier to hide, these type of circumstances and to present yourself in one way. I do mention in the book that if you meet a brother, especially if it's a non-Muslim sister, and he doesn't invite you to come, to his masajid, then you have a problem.
Mm,
If he's interested in marrying you, he should be inviting you into his community if you're not in the same community. And so this is a way, to kind of hide, to frequent multiple communities and have your life in multiple silos, in different communities. And then you have another silo for work and one for social, one for family. And none of
mm.
these communities or these silos, they don't merge. And so it makes it easier. And then with social media, it's definitely
I
easier
think that's been the thing.
to
It's
kind
been,
of reach, multiple places and multiple people and keep this facade, going on.
you know what, that's really interesting, Sister Kaleema, that you mentioned this because, now we're in the influencer age. So we have people who are famous and popular because of social media, right? You have platforms and, some people have gotten major job opportunities just from being a social media influencer, right? Like it's a tool. Like we know it's a tool. But we've recently have spoken about this because there has been, recent like kind of scandals in communities where maybe these sort of positions of influence have been used as a tool to groom and manipulate the opposite gender, whether it was in relationships, whether it was involving money. Um, so and religion is also used as sort of a cover, right? Like a cover for this behavior. Well, I'm practicing polygyny, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. So I guess I wanted to ask you, what are some of those maybe red flags when it comes to people in positions of power religiously as it relates to that grooming piece? Because I know you speak a lot about grooming in your book.
Mhm. Yes. Some of the things that I guess what I would say uncovered with my interviews with the women that are a part of the book is that oftentimes there's just like I said, these silos. And so a person may say, oh, I've been in this community, and you don't check. You ask the questions, but you don't follow up, and then you don't get, the proof, and you just take people, take them at their word. But there are so many situations, almost all of the situations in my book, where the brother was actually living a totally alternate lifestyle from the lifestyle that he, presented. And in my book, I interview women who are Muslim, Christian, women who are
Okay.
Catholic. It's not just Muslim women in my book.
Right,
And
right.
so, each time they presented a totally different life, this life within their religious community, but they also had
Mhm.
an alternate life outside of the community. But it's easy to do because if you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Catholic or whatever the case is, you know where your people are, right? You have no fear of running into someone from your community in certain places. And so you're able to
Mm,
have this alternate, lifestyle going on behind the scenes. Oftentimes it became very apparent for all of the women as soon as the marriage that this lifestyle was not really taking place. For instance, the brother, she was talking to, they were living in separate cities. He was always running off to prayer, running off to the masajid, running off to do these things. And then as soon as they got married, none of these things became apparent. He was not
yeah.
pregnant. He was not going to the masajid. He was not doing anything that he had, said that he was doing. And so this is an easy way to hide behind religion. But when I talk about religious abuse, I'm not only talking about hiding behind the religion. I'm talking about using the religion to oppress and psychologically
Mm,
abuse, women. And this is a part of that religious abuse. In addition, the leaders in the religious communities turning a blind eye because maybe the person has some type of perceived power or prestige or leadership, position in the community. And so the leaders are turning a blind eye to this type of behavior.
absolutely. And I think it's really dicey. I'm finding that it's really dicey and like a slippery slope when it comes to these conversations and their sensitivities on both sides. Whereas people feel like, they want to give people benefit of the doubt, and they want, maybe they want a proper process for like some of these accusations, because I mean, we do live in an age where, accusations do come up and some have been proven untrue. So I mean, with the research, and I know, like I said, you've interviewed not just Muslims, but all, like when it comes to these sort of things occurring, like how do you draw the line when it comes to like these sort of accusations these are real things that are happening in community? We know it's very, very prevalent, but at the same time, like the proper way to sort of handle these things is cancel culture the way, like, I'm curious about this as these new scandals kind of come to light when it comes
Well,
to
in my book, I really don't talk about any scandals or anything like
right.
that, or any accusations. I interviewed women. I developed case studies for each woman that was
Mm,
interviewed in the book, and the book is based on research. It is nonfiction. It's not fiction. And I don't talk about any social like scandals or anything like that. I interviewed the women about the grooming process and the stages that they went through, the love bombing, spirit breaking, and abandonment. But in the red flag portion of the book, I talk about the 9 red flags. Some of the things that became very apparent and routine throughout, regardless of the religion, right, is that this rush to get married. And so in Islam and some Christian communities, this is a great cover for this person because they know that marriage is going to be the forefront and this is going to be the push. And so within 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, if they can make that happen, then this is a great cover, right? Because this is the expectation. And so as far as the red flags is, if the person is pushing, pushing, pushing so much and quickly to get married, you need to ask those very important questions up front and be quick about it. You need to ask them about what community, religious community they're a part of. Who can vouch that you were here? Not taking your word for it, especially if you don't know and have a history, with this person. You need to really go to that imam, that minister, or whomever, and say, is this person a part of your community? Because if you didn't see them in your community, you may assume wrongfully, oh, they were in a neighboring community because they said so, but then maybe they were never there. They were probably, maybe in these cases, at a bar someplace and was not setting foot in any community. And so you really have to ask the questions, ask the follow-up, and then get the proof. Even when it comes to the grooming process, it's always going to be whatever you want, they want. What you like, they like. What you dislike, they dislike. You want to go on
mm,
Hajj? Me too. I want to start a business? Me too. I want to start a yoga club? Me too. I want to, pay off my debt? Me too. I want to purchase. It's going to be me too, me too, me too. But you have to follow up and say, hey, what have you done towards this goal? Of course, goals can change, right? You can say, you're going to go back to school, but something happens and you decide to do something else. But you need to ask them, what have you done or what did you do towards this particular goal? Another thing is when you're with their family, when you're with their friends, you need to bring it up. Oh, what do you think about him saying that, he wants to start this particular business? How do you feel about, his, idea to start a Christian school, a Muslim school? What do you feel about his plans to go to Hajj, and see their response? And these are things we don't do because we're always taught to be so polite. I'm not saying not to be polite, but we have to ask these questions and don't
right.
worry about someone else's feelings, because in the end, it's your life that's going to be turned upside down if you're not an advocate for yourself. Even in my book, one of the women, her wali, became groomed by the groomer, right? And so he dazzled him with, all of these, his work history, his degrees, his perceived status in the community. And so the wali actually, let some things slide. And then when
Mm,
she reported the abuse, he didn't believe her
yeah.
until it became very apparent. And so
Yeah.
you really have to be an advocate for yourself. Don't worry about whose feelings are going to get hurt. If he says he's divorced, let me see the divorce papers. If he doesn't have any, I need to speak to this previous wife that you had, and I need to verify. If you can't verify for me in writing with your divorce papers that has a seal from the county, from the clerk of court, if you can't show that to me, then I need to speak with her to make sure this is the case. Because in some of the cases, when I interviewed these women, the divorce wasn't even final, right? Or there was a situation where the person had abandoned the marriage. The wife doesn't even know that he's seeking someone else. And so you really need to make sure to be an advocate and follow up and ask these questions. And if he doesn't want you to ask these questions, then you
Yeah.
need to just move on.
Right. Absolutely.
Move on.
Absolutely. It's that simple. So, Sister Kaleema, I wanted to add, you mentioned in the beginning in regards to that reference, like where they've been in community. And you mentioned that it's sort of easy to hide behind religion because, things are transient. People can pop into different communities. And also, like I said, social media can give the facade like you're a part, especially if you're in groups and you're plugged in and you know everyone because, it can give that facade. But what about cases where people are really ingrained in community? There are many different, like the story I read at the beginning, which is a very real case study, a factual case study where a community that had been established for a long time, a well-respected, well-known national imam, that many people can vouch for this person. This person has been in community, but they weren't at all who they appeared to be. When those sort of cases, and even like I said, people who have a lot of fame and popularity and they are well respected in communities, but again, that secret life piece. What are some of those, like, if that's there, okay, and I understand the questions that you asked, but this secret life piece, how after the marriage it kind of becomes clear, but what are some other ways, especially for those who are really in community, like they're there, you see them there all the time? What are some of those indicators that something may be off?
Well, unfortunately, even if you check the red flags, nothing is foolproof, right? And
Absolutely.
so sometimes people will slip under the radar. And so you can't, you just really have to be the best advocate that you can, for yourself, for your family member, for a community member. But some of the things that may occur is that the behavior will change because that love bombing stage only lasts about 90 days. Or it can be extended beyond that time after you get married because now this goal has been achieved and now the love bombing is going to continue. But little by little, the love bombing will kind of rescind and the spirit breaking stage will come. And so these are the things that will let you know that something is amiss. The person will be a different person. They will start to demean you. Just something very simple. One of the ladies described how her husband was constantly, commenting on her weight. Excuse me. Either it was, she was losing weight or she was gaining weight. And so she started to have self-doubt. He was demeaning, talking about her hair. If you wear your hair this way, if you wear your makeup this way, if you wear your clothing this way. And eventually he's controlling her exercising, her working out, her diet. And it was trickled, bit by bit by bit. It's not going to be a huge boulder thrown through your window. It's going to be little pebbles thrown at the window. You say, oh, that seems kind of odd. Like,
Right.
why did we go to dinner and he ordered some alcoholic beverage, and then you would think it's some kind of mistake, that he mentioned smoking or he mentioned being someplace where you had no idea. And you would think it's a mistake or he was angry, unexpectedly, right? And lashed out at you. And you think, oh, he must be having a bad day. But then little by little, these things will become more prevalent. The demeaning, the spirit breaking, and just disappearing acts, disappearing for hours, days. Some women reported disappearing for weeks on end, and so these little things will happen because it'll always start small because it's a testing ground. I'm going to test to see how pliable you will be. I'm going to test you inch by inch to see what I can get away with. But also in that testing to see what you can get away with, you become conditioned to the behavior.
Yeah.
You're not going to become conditioned to the behavior if it hits you like a boulder through your window. But little pebbles at your window, you'll begin to drown it out. you'll begin to drown out all those little voices and doubts, because it'll come and go away, come and go away, until all of a sudden this has become the routine. And this is not by happenstance. These people are very cunning. It's a diabolical process, and they repeat the same process over and over again.
Over and over.
I do talk about how this is not the brother that makes a mistake. This is not the brother that gets into a relationship, it just doesn't work out, he makes some bad choices, and he goes on to do something different. I'm talking about the people who do this as a way of life.
Yeah.
They are living multiple lives, different types of, cultural or religious things going on, and they are doing everything in secrecy. It's not the brother that's making mistakes. It's there. You talk about it. That's not what we're talking about here. The narcissist is the narcissism is on a spectrum. The high end of that spectrum is the serial killer. At the core, the serial killer is a narcissist at their core. That's why they feel that they can get away with doing whatever, they can or want to do to people. And at the very low end is that self-indulged person. But narcissism is indeed on this spectrum, right? The brother who is just making mistakes because of lack of upbringing or lack of understanding about relationships and women, or maybe he came from a family that didn't show him, how to be in a relationship. We're not talking about that brother. He doesn't even get on the spectrum.
Right.
This is a person who's just making mistakes. That's not intent. The intent is what we have to look at. The narcissist is intentionally grooming, intentionally demeaning, intentionally abandon and abusing, and they already know they're going to do this from day one.
From day one.
The brother that makes mistakes, he's not said not to do this. He's just accidentally making these mistakes. But the narcissist already knows from day one that your time is limited, and once they run you through love bombing, spirit breaking, abandonment, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, and then they're going to be done with you. And then in the middle of that, they're going to groom with someone else, and they're going to swing from monkey branch to monkey branch to monkey branch.
Absolutely. Whew. Heavy. One of the things that's really interesting is that you are your field is you're an analyst. Were you an analyst for years?
Yes, I still am. Yeah.
Okay, you still are an analyst. So you're a person that really heavily looked at patterns, processes, procedures as a professional. So what's interesting about sort of this charlatan-like behavior, and I don't want us to get, and I told Kaleema, even though we are I don't even want us to get caught up on the word narcissism, because we get so distracted, and I know it's overused, but we're talking about, and I want you to break this down, like this process that is pretty much consistent with everyone that experiences it, these stages and these steps and what tends to happen. And this is really how you can differentiate between, like you said, the person who's just kind of the brother or sister who's sort of kind of fumbling around and trying to figure things out, like most of us are, versus someone who's taking you through stages, a process, a cycle, right? And this could happen in relationships. I've also seen this happen in communities where people are groomed and people are taken through this cycle, this process. Can you specifically, with your expertise as someone who really analyzes processes and procedures, help us understand the difference between the two versus, just someone who's fumbling around versus someone who's.
Yes. So a good example is I like to use is the birthday party. So let's say you're having a birthday party, and we're going to say the jerk and the narc. Okay. So the run-of-the-mill jerk might show up at your birthday party late, cause a commotion, start an argument. Everyone's watching, it's a hot mess, shenanigans and tomfoolery, just spilling out all over the place. This is a run-of-the-mill jerk. For whatever reason, he may have some issues, and that could be repairable, maybe or maybe not. But this is what, the run-of-the-mill jerk will do. Now, the narcissist is going to show up on time with bells on, or they may come late to silently punish you. They're going to bring you the best gift for everyone to envy. All hugs and kisses all the way around. Bring a gift for you, bring a gift for your parents. It's going to be a big show, right? But during the course of the party, the narc is going to whisper demeaning things in your ear while smiling, make demeaning comments to you under their breath, When everyone leaves, he's going to continue to demean you, to be verbally or physically abusive. And because who are you to even have a party in the first place? He will say that you're trying to undermine him by putting a light on yourself, or say that, it wasn't even worth me showing up on time because, who are you? Right? These things won't happen in front of everyone with the run of the mill jerk, right?
Right.
These things will happen behind closed doors, and the narc will, cultivate, the whole, and will groom the whole room, and he will work the room, right? But you already know what's coming later. So this is the difference between the jerk and the run-of-the-mill narc, is the intent. Because the jerk is going to show up and make a fool of himself. He doesn't even know what's about to happen next. He hasn't planned this out. He's just kind of, the bull in the china shop. But the narc already knows what's happening, is that they're going to control you and themselves and everyone around you by handing out gifts, by being very polite, and being, very welcoming to the guests that they don't want there anyway. They never want guests. They don't want, and so they put on a huge show. So you just stage play, and they stick you back on the shelf until they decide to do another show. It's all a stage play.
That's why it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's the deception. It's the facade. Like, I'm presenting one thing, but it's something totally different, beneath the surface.
Yeah.
And it's all strategy, and it's strategic. SubhanAllah. So it's kind of interesting. I've never really spoken about this for my own personal reasons, but, one of the things that, I personally experienced was after having a very over the top glamorous wedding, what really started, like, the whole courting process, like, over the moon, beautiful experience. I would never forget, on the honeymoon, I would say day 2, all of these, when I woke up the next day, all of these criticisms start to hit. And I was so confused by that, because I hadn't heard criticism the whole time. And it was a pretty lengthy courting process and a beautiful wedding, but it was literally that fast after, where these little, and it started off like jokes, jabs. And I remember I started recording certain clips from that, because the honeymoon was just horrendous. It was that fast. So imagine that fast, the everything changing. And so I read something that says the wedding sometimes is the finish line. Like, it's the finish line for them, where that switch sort of happens.
Yes. And in my book, I talk about, one of my own experiences where the day after wedding type thing, I get this horrific story about some outrageous behavior. And it's so outrageous. I'm thinking, you must be making this up. Like, I'm waiting for the punchline, And so although the behavior went back to, the love bombing behavior, this seed was dropped.
Yeah.
And then I immediately said, well, I would hate you too if you did that. So I didn't pass that test. So then the pullback, right? And we go back to the love bombing stage. But that's something that will happen. The person, will drop some little seeds, to talk about some despicable behavior, while you're sitting there with your mouth open thinking, oh my God, who does this? And that's one of the things. And one of the ladies in my book said, if you're constantly saying, who does this? Who behaves this way?
Right.
Get away.
It's a problem.
They're telling you this horrendous act because they want to. The thing about the narc is that they seek so much attention that even bad behavior becomes a platform. And I'm going to tell you about this horrific act that I committed and got away with. And they get a rush from it. But also they want to test you to see how much you will tolerate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to buck against it? Or are you going to help them make excuses about, I understand why you did something like that. I could clearly see what they want to test you out and test the waters.
Absolutely, 100%. One of the things I think is really powerful that you speak about in your book that I haven't quite heard it coined this way is the weaponizing of abandonment. And I thought this was really powerful because on one hand, we sort of have this thought okay, relationship doesn't work out. People would just go their separate ways, no harm, no foul. Everybody has a right to decide whether they want to stay, not, be a part of a community, not be a part of a community, be in a relationship. Not everybody has that right. But weaponizing abandonment and attacking the fundamental human need of belonging, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put that within us, where there's sense of belonging, whether we belong to our families, whether we belong to communities, like this sense of belonging, but that's strategically weaponized and attacked. Can you talk a little bit about this? Because this is a really powerful concept.
Yes. And so the idea of weaponizing abandonment is to punish you, not only to punish you, but to humiliate you and to show that I have complete control. And so, we talk about, in the book, going away on a vacation with a spouse and they disappear and they never come back. Um, Coming home and finding that they're gone, or, you come home and they kick you out, or you go, these are all things that happen in the book. And like I said, this is actual stories and case studies. And so the idea of weaponizing abandonment is, if you're not going to comply, I'm going to show you exactly how powerful I am, and I'm going to disappear. We're not talking about you're going to have an argument and the person's going to say we need time apart, but they're just going to up and disappear and plan the whole thing out. And so in one of the case studies, that was the case. And in my case, we went away on a family vacation, but it was already planned out, right? And then the person just disappears. Okay.
Yes.
And we're not talking about people who, because sometimes, and in my book, I say, this is not, a Muslim problem. It's not an African-American problem. It's not, a white privilege problem. It's not a problem for people who are uneducated. This slips under the radar in every socio-economic educational class. Okay. So we're not talking about people who are just kind of living on the outskirts of society and they don't have consistency. They don't keep consistent jobs, or they don't keep a consistent residence. And some people live this way. And so they may participate in this behavior. But I intentionally, in my book, interview people who are stable, who are seen as stable, and not only stable, but pillars of their community participating in this type of behavior. And the other thing is age. We're not talking about people who are in their 20s. I might give you a pass, because when you're in your 20s, your frontal lobe is not even fully developed, and you make decisions and you make choices that are not clearly thought out. You haven't thought out the ramifications of your actions. But when you're in your 30s, okay, you shouldn't be doing this type of behavior. But we're talking about people in their 50s and their 60s, and they're still participating in this type of behavior, not only weaponizing abandonment to injure the spouse, but to injure the children, the parents, the siblings. Everyone is tangled up in this tornado of destruction.
Forgive me, I'm sorry. Yeah, absolutely. This, like I said, this concept, especially like you said, doing the disappearing acts, where it's 1 minute you're there, 1 minute you're not, and we're starting to see cases of this in record numbers within community, and it's very confusing and jolting. Whereas, people take a long time. Like it puts people in a cycle of confusion, because they're often trying to figure out, well, what's happening? Well, why are they there? Or like I said, for me, I remember, like, as soon as I got back from the honeymoon, even though the plan was everybody was supposed to live together, all of a sudden something happened, a crisis, and now you're gone. Right? And I don't, always gone, always in the wind, always disappearing. That definitely is. And so I have found, and you can speak about this a little bit, that it wasn't just about punishment per se. It also was about this deception. Like sometimes keeping up the deception involves living multiple lives. So sometimes they may have their wife in here, and then they may have something totally an opposite life somewhere else. So yeah.
And it's not a sometimes, it's an all the time, because
it's always a secret life, right?
This is how the person can easily disappear, because they've already set up this other life.
Right.
It's already set up while you're in love bombing. Okay, maybe this is, the central focus. But once you get to the demeaning and spirit breaking stage, this is because they're already love bombing somebody else. And making no mistake about it, it could go on for weeks or months or even years. But this demeaning stage is, coupled with another alternate life being lived or set up. And this is how the disappearing act is so easy and so quick and so complete. It's not coming back and forth for instance, if you're in a normal marriage and you're going to separate or have a divorce,
Mhm.
there's going to be some continuous interaction,
Right.
conversations, how are we going to split this? What are we going to do? We know how we're going to co-parent, how are we going to split the bills, the mortgage, who's going to take what car? There's continuous conversations going on, right? Even before that stage, you're in continuous conversations about if we're going to separate. And if we do, when are we going to separate? What is this pulling apart going to look like? This is a healthy, such as it is separation. What we're talking about in the disappearing act, none of this is happening. You're one day having dinner, you're one day getting a card that says, Alhamdulillah, thank Allah for such a wonderful, beautiful wife on day one. And then 3 days later, boom, there's no one there. Not only is the person gone, all of their things are gone. You've gone someplace, you come back, the house is empty, whatever the case may be. You leave and come back and they change the locks. But this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about people who are separating and, kind of going back and forth and figuring things out and having conversations. We're talking about there will be no conversation. There will be no discussion. The person would disappear. It's almost like you went to the Grand Canyon and someone fell overboard. Someone fell down into the canyon and you came back with one less person. It's that abrupt, and you would never have a conversation. You would never have any closure. And that's the weaponizing part, to keep you from having closure, to cause further injury. But you don't need to have closure from that person. You should never be seeking closure from the person that traumatized you. All you're going to get is more trauma. Get your own closure. Shut the door yourself. Get your own closure. Get therapy. Get counseling. But never go back to the person that injured you for closure, because you're going to get more of the same. Either they're going to reel you back in, or they're going to punish you further, because now they see they have some control. And so, that closure, is overrated.
It's a trick. It's a trick.
Yeah, it's overrated. You don't need closure from that person. The closure is from within. Allah can give you closure that you need to move on.
Absolutely. And closure does come from Allah, honestly. SubhanAllah. So I deeply appreciate this conversation. I wanted to bridge into talking a little bit more about, specific to us as Muslims, and as it relates to that concept of, like, the term spiritual abuse, I have a weird relationship with, because it's used in a multitude of ways. But I'm just going to say using religion as a tool to deceive and manipulate other people, to groom people, which unfortunately happens a lot. So I want us to kind of focus in on this more so than kind of like, the other nuances with the narcissistic cycle, but like this in particular. And I want us to focus on some of the things that we should, first of all, be careful for, and ways to navigate beyond it. Because one of the things that people really deal with when their religion is attacked, their relationship with Allah is attacked, is this shame, this idea that, like, I'm not any good. My faith is corrupted. I'm not a good Muslim. This is something that a lot of women struggle with. And it's one of the ways that some people go into compliance, or are pushed into compliance with things that maybe they would never do, is out of this fear of not being in obedience, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the alarming ways that this can happen, and maybe some of the red flags, and also ways to, like, sort of move beyond that shame.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to say is that, the victim, or the person who was groomed, is going to be groomed to have that shame, and
Yeah.
shame started before the abandonment or the abuse, in those little pebbles, right? Those pebbles that were thrown, that you thought, oh, that hurt a little bit, but that was a mistake. That's where the tolerance for shame, began, right? But I think that I would say in my own case, I wouldn't advise, everyone to do what I did, but I decided, when they say come hard or go home, I decided I'm not going to be ashamed. I didn't do anything to be ashamed of. My family, my friends, my community, my parents, they didn't do anything to be ashamed of. And so rather than do that, I'm just going to pull out and, be my own advocate and be the advocate for those other women who can't speak out. Because there is no, it's the same type of situation where there's sexual abuse and physical abuse, and they blame the victim. What were you
Right.
wearing? Did you have on a skirt that was short? Did you have on too much perfume, too much makeup? Were you out after dark? Well, of course, there are some situations that, would put you in an unsafe, position. However, when you're talking about in the sanctity of the marriage, and then someone abandons the marriage, the same thing would happen. What did you do to make him do that? All these questions will come, and so, the truth will welcome the questions and a lie will not. An innocent man stays and a guilty man flees. This is what people should look at, because there's nothing, you can get a divorce. You can decide you don't want to be wherever you are. Everybody has the right to do that. But what you don't have the right to do is to orchestrate a planned abandonment, discard the family, and cause trauma while you're leaving. Because everyone has the right to leave a place.
Yeah.
But you have to think about how. And that was one of the things I talked about when we had a roundtable discussion. You need to talk to the previous wife, not to cause drama, not to stir the pot, not to find out who shot John and all the details of the marriage, what happened. You don't need to really know this. What you really want to know is, how did it end? How did he treat you in the end? Did he take care of his responsibilities? Did he duck out of the marriage and leave you holding the bag financially, mentally, spiritually, financially? Or was there a conversation to pull this apart? Was there a plan to pull this apart? What was his behavior in the end? That's really what you want to know if you speak to the previous wife. And I would advise you to do it. If a person does not want you to do those things, then you really need to take a breath and step back.
Yeah.
And so if they don't want you to do this, or if they don't want you to talk to family members, if they don't want you to, I'm saying, run a background check. It's surprisingly very cheap. And if someone is good on paper, they may clear that background check. But what you might find is they have more than one residence that they didn't tell you about. And then you might find, oh, there's a whole family at that other residence.
Yeah. You'll see these names pop up
at this residence. And so these are some of the things that people don't want to talk about because they want to be polite. But when you're thinking about your livelihood, women and men, but we're talking about women in this book, people commit suicide in this behavior. They go into long-term depression. Their lives are unraveled in a way that they can never put back. And that's one of the things I did say in my book. I'm not among the most vulnerable in the population.
Right.
That's why I wanted to include other women in my book. And that's why I wanted to talk about the process so we can protect the most vulnerable in the population.
Right. Because that financial abuse is something really serious.
So that's the thing, because women are living in their cars with their children, their shelters, because of abuse and abandonment. And so these are the people.
Orchestrated abandonment. That's really important. Orchestrated abandonment.
Right. And any abandonment is, like I said, you haven't had a conversation about how we're going to dissolve this union.
Yeah.
So everyone can come away. Everyone is going to be hurt, but everyone can come away in a way that they can rebuild their life. They can maintain, their community, maintain their family bonds and things of this nature. But abandonment is always going to be the case where one party has no idea that this is happening. And so their ability to protect themselves, the women, their ability to protect their children, their ability to protect their parents who may be under their care. When this happened to me, I was caring for my father who was terminally ill. And so all of my focus was divided after this, because now I'm caring for my father. I remember even sitting at hospice. He was living in my home, but the last 2 weeks of his life, I ended up, he and I ended up deciding that, he was going to be at hospice because the care became too much as far as IVs and things of that nature. I'm not equipped to do that. But I remember sitting in hospice and I had already started researching. I didn't know I was going to write a book, But because I'm a policy analyst, I like to dig and research things and figure out why, right? That's, my workplace hazard. And so I started researching this idea, this situation and why this is happening, And so when you think about women who need to care for themselves, care for their children, care for their parents, and one person just up and leaves, that's not only the physical gap, there's a financial gap, there's a spiritual gap, there's a psychological gap, a huge hole that the whole family is going to be sucked down into this hole.
So can I ask you about that, if that's okay? I just want to clarify. So you're saying that when you went through your abandonment, this experience, when you were abandoned, you were taking care of your terminally ill father.
Yes.
Okay. And financially, things are all wrapped together. Did that have an impact?
Oh yeah. Most definitely, because yes. So I was caring for my father in the home, at the time that it occurred. And so we had gone away on a vacation because, things were kind of, this is during COVID.
What's up with these vacations right before they leave?
Let me tell you, I have to tell you this. It's funny and it's not. I was talking to one of my counselors, and I said one because I had more than one. I had a female counselor who was Christian. I had a male counselor who was Muslim. And I was talking to one of my counselors, and I said, well, I guess I should just be happy that I didn't wake up with a pillow over my face. And she said, while you're sitting there, laughing, this happens. People go away on vacations and somebody doesn't come back. It's not an accident. Someone fell over off the cruise, someone slipped down the mountain, we went hiking and this person didn't come back. And so these vacations, are an easy out, right? And hopefully everyone comes back intact. And so,
So I'm sorry, Sister Kaleema. So okay, so let's put the killers to the side. The ones that come back, because I had a vacation right before mine ended. So I'm curious about this actually. So you said it's an easy out for those who come back, and what like how is it an easy out?
I'm saying it's an easy thing to orchestrate to remove the person, because now the person is removed from family members who can see what's happening.
I see. They're in a different, okay.
And so, when you think about in an abusive relationship, whether it's physical or psychologically abusive, the abuser is going to separate you.
Right.
Separate you from, first of all, they've already compromised all of your safe spaces with the grooming process. They're grooming you, your parents, your children, your coworkers, the neighbor, the mailman, the dog, the cat, everybody's being groomed. So all of your safe spaces have already been compromised. Right. But so some people will end it there and abandon right there because they know you don't have these people to go to, the imam, whomever, everyone's been sucked into this wormhole, right?
Yeah.
But the vacation is to physically separate you from anyone, because, and it depends on the person, because with my personality, I'm going to be doing this. Somebody better come and see what's happening.
Right, better come, right.
Right? Y'all better come and see what's happening over here. But if you're separated, so there was a whole 8 hours.
I got it now.
And so now no one can show up and see what's happening here.
Yes.
Right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I want to move us towards some of the ways, and you dropped a lot of like empowering tips and tools, but I know you care a lot about the recovery process. I do a lot of work in recovery as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about recovery as well as, mashallah, one of the things I've noticed is that sometimes, we wonder like, well, how do these horrible things happen? But I've noticed that some of the people that have been really tested with these sort of, I call this like a test between darkness and light. Like this is really, you're really navigating evil. And people that have really dealt with that, they know how dark it got for them. But some of the people, when they're able to recover and rise from it, like, I mean, look at you, look at all of us, mashallah. I see them rise, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows them to rise in such a way that's like, subhanallah, like you wonder if that test was also a blessing. You know what I mean? Because it also like, I see people's purpose open up and everything. So I want to talk a little bit about that recovery and how to pivot that pain into power.
Yes, I definitely believe now. At the time, it didn't feel like it because I'm telling you,
Girl,
I have never that I was in a really, really dark place, right? And
amazing.
now in the end, I feel like my trauma birthed my book.
Yeah.
I started writing when I was 12, writing
Mm,
poetry and short stories. I went to college. I majored in English lit. I wanted to write the great American novel, but I
yeah,
went on to write federal healthcare policy. Okay, did it for 23 years. Didn't write that book, right? And so when you think about the trauma that you're experiencing, and I don't want to trivialize anyone's trauma,
absolutely.
but sometimes when you're not in a place where you belong, and Allah sees that you're in this space and you're not moving, He will cause something to move you. Think about the baby in the womb. The baby is comfortable there. They don't want to leave. It's nice and warm, it's cozy, that tight. But guess what? When they outgrow that space, now here comes the trauma. The trauma of the baby coming through the womb, the trauma for the baby, the trauma for the mother. But then after the birth, they're both happy, they're together. Look at this beautiful child that you're going to love even beyond life, right? But all of that happened during a traumatic experience, right? So sometimes the trauma is a space for growth. And that is
Yes.
indeed what happened. I'm not going to say I woke up one day and I was like, oh, yeah, now, everything is good. No, I went through a long, intensive therapeutic process. I had a counselor and a therapist,
Hmm.
working on both ends. I had therapy through my place of employment. It was a train wreck because you're thinking about, there was, we go away on a vacation to come back with one less person. It's almost as if someone just fell off a cliff. So
Yeah.
now you're grieving like a death, right?
Hmm.
It affected my home life because now I come home and I still have my dad to care for. So now, my dad is really within 3 weeks, I don't know it, but within 3 weeks of the end of his life. So his care was very intense, right?
Yeah.
And so you just kind of, as we do, we just keep moving forward in the dark,
Mhm.
and so you just never really know until you push forward and keep going through what Allah sees and has in store for you. So
Yeah.
after, excuse me, after all of that time, then I finally write a book, but maybe I didn't have anything to say. Maybe I didn't have enough knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to write a book that would be useful until this happened, right? And it took me a while to get to this point because then we also have to think about what was my part that I played in this.
Yeah. Accountability.
Played a part. And it's not that I played some devious part. I played a part in not being an advocate for my own safety and well-being, right?
Absolutely.
That's the part that I played, but at the same time, if you have someone who is very cunning and grooming everyone around you, it's not a perfect world. And these things are just going to happen. So the best we can do, and I hope to do with my book, is to show these red flags. Everybody has a couple of red flags, but if you see 2 and 3 and all these things are happening and none of these things are adding up, at least take a pause. They can't wait you out. The narc needs to be in this relationship. They cannot be alone. They need to be married in 3 months, 4 months. You wait them out. They'll move on.
I love it.
They'll move on. You
Right.
know,
Yeah. And another thing I found is that, they love like over intense type of contact early on because again, they're trying to get you into that like emotional dependency as quickly as possible so they don't like to be in love bombing stage long. So like they want to be on your phone and FaceTime and they just don't ever, and for those who may be in need or seeking needs being met, like they have voids where they're looking for that validation, they're looking for that attention, they're looking for that sense of belonging. And like for people who are needy of that, right? They may think, wow, like this person's really into me. Like you can really be deceived by that. But one of the things I always suggest to women is really set a very early boundary around your time. Even if you desire to be on the phone and texting with a guy, because we like that, feeling in the beginning, set a boundary. This is, trust me, set, because one thing they're going to try to push that boundary
Mhm.
because they
Every
need,
boundary you set will be tested, will
yeah,
be broken,
yeah,
and we have to really, excuse me, understand that this is a very traumatic experience. You will see people who have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a part of Stockholm syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And this trauma bonding, and so we really have to make sure that people are getting and seeking counseling and therapy. And it's still a stigma in our community. And so many people are suffering. They're on the verge of doing the unthinkable because no one's believing them.
Right.
And we need to make sure if someone tells you that they're being abused or marginalized or manipulated, oppressed in some way, you have to believe them.
Yeah.
And you have to help them seek help. You may not be able to help them, but you have to find some resources for them. Because that's
Yeah.
another thing. You don't want to, be a shade tree mechanic and give someone, psychological advice, when you're not, skilled in that way. And so we want to make sure we understand how to help people seek support, that is, not, here's the thing. This type of situation is abused mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. If you
Hmm.
don't get healing mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially, when you go on to that next relationship, you're not going to be ready. It's no different than if you walk into the street and got hit by a car. They pick you up, take you to the hospital, get, the orthopedic surgeon puts your leg back together, put you in a cast, put you back out on the street. Well, guess what? They didn't deal with the financial trauma of being in the hospital.
Yeah.
They haven't dealt with the trauma of getting hit by the car. They haven't dealt with why you were even in the middle of the street in the first place. All they did was patch your leg up. So when you have a traumatic relationship, and then you may fix one of these things or two of these things, but you're not ready to enter into another relationship until all of these areas have been completely healed. So you know why you were in the middle of the street, and you can learn how not to end up in the middle of the street again. Because people say, why do I keep picking these same people? You're not healed. Why do the same person keeps following, finding me, the same type? Because you're not healed mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. So even though you want to make a better decision, you can't. You don't have the tools to make a better decision.
Right. And that's one thing I think that's it. First of all, you said a couple of things I think is important when you mentioned the different, because
Mm.
sometimes people think of the emotional pain or, sometimes the psychological impact. But you meant when that financial piece, people overlook it all the time. And then they have all this baggage, and that they're carrying. Financial abuse has many implications, can have many very devastating implications on a person's life. And that could be one of the hardest things to actually recover from. So I really love that you're identifying these different pieces because they are often overlooked, right? That you do have to address all of it. And I personally believe in like it's recovery. I say a trauma bond is equivalent. I did a lot of research on this, but it's very equivalent to a drug addiction. So just like a drug
Mhm.
addiction requires a recovery, and sobriety is not linear. Like there's no like a person who's recovering from a drug addiction is always at fear and at risk of picking back up the needle. They have to do a lot of things to maintain their sobriety. It's not that different with when it comes to trauma bonds, especially if it was a long-term one. So it has the same sort of it has the same impact on the brain. It has the same implications neurologically. So it requires a recovery program or recovery process, and it also requires maintenance. So that's just something that people need to understand. Doesn't mean you have to wait this long time until you feel like, oh gosh, I guess now I'm healed. It's like a person doing a 12-step program. Like you
Mhm.
constantly have to do that maintenance and check. But one of the things I wanted to mention that I think is just really powerful is this idea, and I think it was, I don't know if someone tapped on it, but this idea that like this victim blaming, because one of the reasons why people often don't speak about this, and again, I knew once I opened up this conversation, I try my best to name it right and to frame it right, but I knew that it would be this sort of aversion to this sort of dialogue, just simply because number one is from a woman's point of view, or it's women's perspectives who are being shared, even though you can share one perspective and it doesn't mean that you're excluding the other. But that's one thing. And then also there's sometimes this framing where it's like, well, women make bad choices, like they choose the wrong type of people, and that's why they're in that situation, right?
Most
I
likely,
think that's
if you're involved with a narc, you didn't make that choice. They chose you. They targeted you. They stalked you. They watched you. They groomed you. It wasn't a choice. It is a choice, but I'm just saying it wasn't. You didn't really make that first choice, most likely, right? But the victim blaming is definitely real. And so that's why we have to really caution ourselves when people are telling us to kind of try to get a full understanding, or ask them to seek some help from someone who's a professional in that area. Because even for me, I remember one of my very best friends, we're still best friends to this day, and she said, "Why didn't you tell me that you were having problems?" And she was really insulted that I had not come to her, because we talk about,
yeah,
she had
yeah,
been helping me with my struggles with my dad. We have been, you know, we've been friends for 20 years. And she said that. And she said, "Why didn't you tell me you were having problems?" Or, "How can I tell you something that I don't know is happening?" Right. And so when I finally was able to explain what happened, and then she was mortified. And she said, "I can't believe," one of my friends who's a social worker said, "It's making me doubt even myself professionally." She said, "Because she said, my livelihood and my life depends on reading people." She said, "I go into homes and have to take kids out sometimes." She said, my life depends on me being a good read of people." And so she was just shocked, right? And so I'm not saying that they were blaming me, but the victim blaming also comes from is shattering the very foundation of your religious beliefs, your moral beliefs, your family and your cultural beliefs. And so it's hard to even wrap your brain around it, right? Even when you always see when something happens, the neighbor says, I just had no idea. And they
right.
can't really fathom that someone that they spoke with over the fence, maybe we cut each other's grass, we attended each other's, our kids' birthday parties and graduations. And, they can't even fathom that this person did this thing. If it was a mass shooting, if it was an abandonment, if it was abuse, if it was sexual assault, they can't even wrap their brain around it. And so their comfort is to say, one, either it didn't happen, or two, you must have done something to make it happen, because they're also trying to seek comfort for themselves. They're in shock.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes they are just blaming the victim, but sometimes it's because they love these people, and because they've been groomed as well, and they're thinking, how did I miss this? And then
yeah,
they start to blame themselves. Like, what could I have done? Why didn't I say this? I saw this happening. I can't tell you how many people say, "Oh yeah, I saw this and I saw that," but and they kind of brush it off. But
right,
it's
right.
natural, and it happens. We can't. Alara already told us we're going to have struggle and strife, and we're going to have obstacles to overcome. And Shaitan is waiting for us on the path. We already know this.
Yeah,
He's not waiting
absolutely.
in the dark alley. He's on the Siddhartha Mustaqim. He's on the path. He's on this right path.
And
He
he's
doesn't
attacking us.
wait for people in the alley. They're already doing what they're doing in the alley.
Absolutely.
That's a waste of time for Shaitan, right? He's going to be
Abs-
on the path. He already told us he's going to wait for us on the path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a powerful thing you just said. And one of the things that's I always say, like, this is a spiritual problem. So, I know we talk about recovery and healing, but I want to emphasize that, like, a spiritual problem can only be rectified spiritually in the end, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even if a lot of times, just in just kind of giving people a little bit of grace here, a lot of times people can't see it, not only because of the person that, even if they don't know the person, unless I realized, until you have the experience, you have no idea what this is.
But yeah.
You have no frame to, like, it's no way until you experience it. So I had to give a lot of the people in my life a lot of grace, because
Mhm.
I couldn't expect them to be able to know or understand. And even it's difficult to explain it to people who've never been through it. They don't understand it. It doesn't make sense because it is meant to be confusing. And
Mhm.
so, that also is a piece as well. Like, until you go through it, that's why if you are going through it and you have been through it, and you need to go to an expert, or you need to go to someone specifically who can assist you. And it's better if they have more than just book knowledge, that they also have a framework of the experience, because unless you go through it, it's really difficult to understand it.
And I did want to add something about the different areas that have to recover. You have a legal battle on your hands when you're dealing with this type of person, because you're thinking about the financial piece, but with that comes a legal battle. And so oftentimes, people think they have no power, that,
Mm,
I don't have a state marriage license, so I have no power. That's not true. Okay.
okay.
But what we need to do is to make sure, and this is where the imams play a very important part. We need to make sure if you don't have a state marriage license, that's your
Okay.
choice. But you need to have an Islamic marriage contract. And you need
Yes.
to understand the requirements for a contract in your state. It's not the same in every state.
Mm,
You need to check out the requirements for a contract in your state that can hold up in court.
ooh.
You need to do this on the front end. You need to ask him out the gate. I want an Islamic marriage contract, or I want a marriage license. I want both, and if he blinks, keep it going. Don't if this if he blinks, no, this is not going to work, because let me tell you, you have and he needs to protect his rights as well,
Yeah.
right? But the problem is, what we don't understand is when it comes to a contract, every state has a different requirement for what is a contract that can come to court, and it doesn't really matter about that license if you have a contract. So if the imam
Mm,
require you to have a contract that also has been notarized, that is legal in that state, meets all the legal requirements to be a contract in the state, you can make a contract for anything. Two adults can make a contract for anything, for marriage, to buy a home, to work, whatever the case. So we need to educate the imams on what they should be looking for, and not to just have, I'm not saying they're doing it haphazardly, because they're doing it with the religion in mind. But
yeah.
this is not just a spiritual union. This is a legal union. This is a
People. Mhm.
financial union,
Financial.
right? And so we need to educate ourselves. I do have that in my book. I talk about how to protect yourself legally.
God.
I talk about some things, such as in some states like Virginia and Georgia, and some states, California, they say, oh, it's a 50-50 state. Well, yeah, it is. But in an uncontested divorce, but if you're not agreeing with the 50-50, you can say, I want to contest the divorce. I want to contest the process. I want to have a trial. I want to go to court. Let the judge decide who's going to get what. When they say it's a 50-50 state, this is not etched in stone. This
Hmm.
is just the beginning of the process, right? So, in an abandonment case, women and children should not be walking away, losing their
And
homes,
living in cars. Yeah.
lose, the job, lose their health insurance, living in a shelter,
Absolutely.
and so that's the other piece that I talk about in the book. I have, a prenuptial agreement in the book. I have an Islamic marriage contract in the book. I have all these, excuse me, documents and things that you can use to protect yourself. But the thing is, you have to protect yourself on the front end.
Yeah. Got to be
Fight that
smart about
hard
it.
battle on the back end. You can, I did. You can make it work. You can really get what what you intend to do. But you want to set yourself up for success. The imams should set us all up for success. I'm not saying that they're not intending to do it, but we need to make sure we have all the legal, ducks in a row to set everyone up, him and her, for success, but also for, if there's a dissolution of the marriage, that your Islamic rights are not being violated in this process. I told my attorney, you're doing a great job. You're doing a great job defending me as a citizen of this state, but you've yet to defend my Islamic rights. And she didn't know what I was talking about, of course. I explained it to her, and then I said, we're going to pivot and go this way. And then
Mm,
that's what we did. I'm like, my rights have been violated beyond. I have more rights beyond the rights that the state give me,
absolutely.
right? And these rights have been violated, and we need to address this in court.
Wow.
Another thing, you can have your imam, you can request that the imam be called as an expert witness, not as an
Mm,
expert witness to your marriage, an expert witness to your rights, if you don't have these things in place.
subhanallah.
The imam is an expert witness. They're considered experts in their field.
Mm,
It
mm,
would be no
mm.
different than calling, a doctor or a nurse, to testify to your physical abuse. What were your rights? How were your rights violated in this abusive situation, right? When it comes to domestic violence. But how were your rights violated religiously? And there is a separation of church and state, but you want that information to be put forward. If we continue to do that, we can change the process.
Absolutely.
Because
That right there.
a marriage is a contract.
Right. That's so powerful, because I feel like in a lot of our Islamic marriages, and this is gonna, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but I remember saying this not long ago, where I found divorce to be unnecessarily cruel and traumatizing. And I'm not even talking about a narcissist, but I'm talking about like this like sudden like to luck, and then like everything is a whirlwind, and it's like, oh, you got 3 months maintenance, and then what? But it's like, if you've invested all this time and money and effort, and it can be a pretty daunting experience. And like I said, one of the things I've also found is that a lot of our leaders, even though I know that they really care, I've spoken to a lot of them about this, they really do care, but they don't quite have the understanding as it relates to this type of abuse. And a lot of them are like, well, if I can't, see it, I can't prove it. There's not evidence. There's nothing I can do. So a lot of them, a lot of them just are really unaware of this cycle and things, and cases come to them all the time. And I'm sorry, a lot of them are not managed properly.
Right. But what they are, when I said about being an expert witness, they are an expert on your rights, right? But they're not. I mean, that's why you have attorneys about the legal issue too. And you need to, even if you're in this situation and you're going through a divorce, you need to be in counseling. And that's another expert witness to your abuse, to the fallout in your abuse, the emotional distress, the PTSD, and people think, oh, that's just PTSD is, for people who have been in the military or some traumatic experience or, a mass shooting. But PTSD occurs when any type of traumatic experience, mental, physical, spiritual, financial, and you have ongoing prevailing thoughts. You can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't function, you can't work, you close your eyes and you keep seeing this thing, it's something, you hear something. I remember that, and I'm a very, I don't need a fainting couch, I'm just, but after this experience, I remember, I was, excuse me, I couldn't stand to be in big crowds.
Yeah.
And I asked my counselor, like, what is this? Like, I would speak, to 400 people, in my profession, or to conduct training, to hundreds of people at one time. But now all of a sudden I can't walk into the Nike store because it's crowded, and now I'm having a panic. But it's because it was explained to me that you were in a place where you thought was safe and it wasn't. And now you're unsure about every space and thinking nothing is safe. And I went through a long period where I felt this way.
Yeah.
And I thought I must be going crazy,
Right.
but I felt this way. And I said, you're right, because, when you give over to your union and you say, this is a safe space, and then it blows up. Now you're thinking, what am I missing in the Nike store? What am I missing over here at,
Hypervigilance.
what am I missing at work? How, am I really safe? I thought I was safe before and I wasn't. And so you have to have counseling, you have to have therapy. It's a long process, but you have to be able to unpack all this baggage, before moving on. And just, it's going to take a while. Mentally,
Yeah.
spiritually, financially, you have a whole lot of baggage to unpack. And people will come to you and say, are you getting married again? Are you thinking of it? What? Huh? Are you, and this is because this is the expectation, but don't let people rush you through that process.
Absolutely. Yeah. SubhanAllah. That hypervigilance kicked my behind. Like,
Mhm.
I was always a kind of a really like a flowery, unicorns and rainbow type of personality. I have a daughter similar to that. Whereas like my parents would be like super like, concerned about safety. I live in a house. I won't lock my doors. I just had that sort of flower child type mentality until I went through that experience. And now I'm like, everything is a threat, and I was like, subhanAllah, like I never had that experience until thereafter. But yeah, hypervigilance is definitely a thing.
Because if you're
SubhanAllah.
walking down the street in the middle of the night, you're expecting, right? You think something, you're preparing for something, you're on guard. But if
You're
you're
on
asleep
guard.
in your bed at night, this is a safe space. Nothing should be happening here, right?
Yeah. But it can become a space where you really feel threatened.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can turn into that. Yeah, absolutely. SubhanAllah. Well, this has been a really, really powerful conversation, and we had so many comments. I know we had a question, Sister Kaleema, as we're wrapping up. It was a brother actually, and I'm trying to find his comment. I wanted you to finish. Okay. He asked, he said, has there been any research into why men? I'm going to just change that just because I really don't want that framework. Remember, Sister Kaleema did her research. She interviewed women. Like, for example, I coach women. It's just a particular, it's
Well,
a
here's
choice.
the question, because I did in my book, I do talk about why is he going to ask about why this is more
Men become
prevalent.
narcissistic.
Yes, I do talk about that in my book,
Okay,
though, because
go
my book
ahead.
is not. I do want to say this: my book is not for women. It's for women primarily, but it's also for men. It's for men who have women in their lives, their mothers, their daughters, their sisters, their nieces, that they want to protect from this type of grooming and this type
Okay.
of abuse. And I do talk in my book. I want to say, you have the beta readers and the people who read the book before it goes to the publisher. I had
Yes.
25 beta readers, 17 of them were men.
Great.
I did that on purpose because I wanted to make sure that my book did not villainize men. I wanted to know
Great.
how men felt about my book before it hit the publisher, because it was
Okay.
not my goal to villainize men. In my book, I even caution women, because you went through this, it doesn't mean that all men are bad.
Yeah.
You're going to have men in your corner. You're going to have men in your circle. You're going to have men around your children to recover. They're going to be important to your recovery process.
They are. They really are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my book is for women, but it's also for men. But
Great.
to the question,
Yeah.
the psychologists, in the research, they're saying that men are more prone to being diagnosed. So someone can have narcissistic behaviors, but not necessarily have narcissistic personality disorder. But more
Absolutely.
men are officially diagnosed with narcissism because it is a part of that aggressive makeup. Right. But all of these things, like even like I have a teenage son, his aggression, these things are necessary for him, right?
It's a
As a
part of his
boy, as
masculinity.
a
Yeah.
man, he just has to know how to harness these things. His aggression doesn't become a problem until it comes in the wrong space, till it's uncontrolled, or when it's
Mm,
intended it's used to harm someone. But
mm.
the aggression that men have is necessary when it comes to protecting your family,
Yes.
protecting themselves, right? So this is not the problem. The aggression is not the problem. It's the misuse of it that becomes
Mm,
the problem. So in the book, I do talk about how these men develop these narcissistic tendencies. Oftentimes, it's a really bad relationship with the parent. It could be that they were abandoned themselves, with the father, abandoning the family. It could be, that they were overindulged. They're the center of the universe for the family, and everything they do is okay, right?
mm.
And I don't know why she keeps running into his fist. You know,
Right.
not that he's hitting her. Why is she running into his fist, right?
Right.
Because this type of abuse also doesn't show, it doesn't leave broken bones and bloody noses and blackened eyes, but it is something that is groomed, even is ingrained, even as a child, because of
Okay.
overindulgence or also because of emotional abuse. But that person having that issue, they need to get it, they need to take care of it. It doesn't mean it's okay for you to visit that evil on me,
Right.
right? It's not okay for me to visit, my, stuff on you. I need to have it fixed. I need to seek help and counseling so I can enter into a healthy relationship and bring something good to the table.
Absolutely. Okay. And then the second part question was far as for the actual wolf or narcissist or whatever you want to call them, um, getting help, that individual getting help. Do you talk about that in your book?
Yes. Well, unfortunately, with if the person is truly a narcissist, they will not seek help.
I know
In
that's
fact, if they go to get help, they were likely to groom to groom the therapist.
triangulation.
That happens. They will groom the therapist, or if they can't groom the therapist, if the therapist knows their work and they can't groom the therapist, they're going to say the therapist is, oh, they don't have the right credentials, or they don't really know what they're talking about. They're going to demean the therapist and their profession and their ability, or say counseling is not necessary. All I need to do is this. And so they're not likely to get help. the best we can do is to keep our distance. And we know we see these behaviors and traits. It's just like if you see someone with a cold, now we put on a mask. We need to protect ourselves and put a barrier between us and them. Don't try to fix the narcissist.
Yeah.
You're just going to just be throwing more, good energy after bad.
And one of the things I think people fall for a lot, I hear this over and over and over with clients, is well, he's in therapy now. So so there, like a lot of times, like I said, that therapist becomes a part of what we call triangulation, where you're putting a third party into a two-party, where you're attempting to break down your victim even further by inserting a third party. But that will be something that will often confuse victims, is that they'll think like, oh, they're in therapy now, so like they're better, they're getting. And also I want to just say this as someone who is a behavioral therapist, who does do this for a living. Therapy is not the end all be all. Please listen to me very clearly. Okay, there is a lot. I'm talking personally, I'm not speaking for Sister Kaleema. There are a lot of flaws in the therapeutic process. Okay, there are many people that have come, and this is why I decided to coach instead of have come to coaching or to alternative healing sort of methods, because their therapist just missed it, or their therapist was pulled into the triangulation. They were groomed as well, right? And they had further broke the victim down. So it's not the end all be all. I hear this sort of thing and I think, oh my gosh, they're in therapy, so everything is going to be fixed now. And it just does not work like that. Yeah. It's one tool that is necessary that helps you process and work things through. But you need, like, therapy in the absence of spiritual support, I believe is completely flawed. Like, I don't. So my thing is, you need a variety of different things to plug in. And Sister Kaleema, you could comment on that. But I just, I hear that often.
You're right. There's two things I want to say about that. One of the ladies in my book was was groomed by a psychologist.
Yeah.
This was her intended.
Oh yeah, they're big time.
He groomed her and he groomed the wali. Mm-hmm. And they're both, tangled up in this web. But he's a psychologist and he groomed them, right? And he went on to later psychologically abuse her. Then she finds out, he had been engaged and or married like 8 or 9 times, and all this type of thing. The other thing I want to say was, you have to shop for therapy and counseling like you shop for anything else. People put a whole lot of work into shopping for a pair of shoes and the perfect this. Well, therapy is the same way. You have to make sure that you have a good rapport with this person. You have to really make sure this person understands your spiritual goals, like you just said. You don't want to go to therapy with someone who doesn't understand your spiritual goals, and then they have you doing something or suggest you do something that's not in line, with who you are. I did mention that I had a counselor and a therapist, and one was Muslim and one was Christian. Well, the one that was Christian, the first thing she said to me was, "I'm not a Muslim. I don't know a lot about Islam." She said, "While we're going through this process, I want you to let me know whenever I'm telling you or ask you to do something that's not in line with your beliefs."
Yeah.
And that's when okay, now I can move forward with this person. Because it may not be a case where you can find a Muslim therapist at that time or in your location. Of course. But even if you go to a therapist who is not a Muslim, because they are professionals, but you still got to shop around. You have to make sure it's a good fit for you, for your family. They understand your spiritual goals and beliefs, and they're okay with that.
Absolutely. Beautiful advice. Well, Sister Kaleema, I appreciate you. We could talk all night about this. I really appreciate you. I know, guys, this was a really heavy topic. It was intended to be heavy because this is something that, again, I remind people over and over. This is an issues-driven podcast, okay? So we do discuss heavy, heavy issues. But again, this is, as I can see in the comments, there's so many people that have went through this, that are going through this. And we want you to know that there are spaces and places for you to get support. I need each and every one of you to go and purchase Sister Kaleema's book, Hidden in Plain Sight. Sister Kaleema, can you tell us where we can all go? Because inshallah, we're going to commit to going to go purchase this book. Where can we go to purchase the book?
Yes, my book is available online at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Google Play, iTunes, and it's on Kindle.
Yes.
Right now, you can go to any of those sources. If you go to my Facebook page, at the top, you will see the press release from Fulton Books. If you click on it, you'll see all those options to purchase, right? Coming in the next week or so, my other platforms will be live. The business page for the book Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and a YouTube channel. All of these things will go live in the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to easily, quickly go and purchase. But right now, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I hope you get the book. I want to hear back from you. Let me know what you think about it. Please leave me a review if you love it. And if you don't, just contact me directly.
No, they're gonna love the book. So
I want to hear back and your thoughts. It is my first book. And so, inshallah, I'll have another book, and it won't be this heavy. I do want to really, the book is not all about problems. I do have solutions. But I do want to maybe move forward, away from this, because the book was written in real time while I was going through this.
Absolutely.
And now, I'm obviously in a different space. And so I want, excuse me, I do want to follow up with something that would be even more supportive to those who have come out of that tornado, and they're recovering, their life.
Yes, and I hear people saying, I just bought the book, I'm buying the book. So
Oh,
again,
yeah,
but it's important because again, we have to support our community members doing this work. Honestly, there's people all outside of our community. They've written these books. You can find it. They've, we're that has a lot of that has been done, but it's really important for us in our community. Like when we have Black authors, Muslim authors, and they're writing and they're including our perspective, and it's for us. It's really important that we support this work, right? This is new work, like it hasn't really been done. So we want to support that. Make sure, inshallah, I want to hear. I have everybody's commitment. Okay, I hear people saying we'll buy. Inshallah, everyone who's here, your commitment to purchase the book in plain sight. Hidden in Plain Sight by Kaleema Overton Ameen on Amazon, Barnes and Noble,
Google Play, iTunes, and Kindle.
iTunes, everywhere where you can purchase.
It's everywhere.
Just go ahead. Okay, alhamdulillah. Sister Kaleema, thank you so much for being here. Alhamdulillah. I remember when you were just writing your book, and mashallah, just to see the transformation in your work. And I remember even before, Sis Kaleema was supposed to come on a podcast a while ago, but the book hadn't finished. And she was like, I'm not ready. And I'm like,
I would have been a mess. Like, I was still,
He was in the thick of it.
Yeah, I was in the thick of things.
Yeah. So it's just beautiful to see the finished product and the finished work. And I'm, like I said, I'm proud that I was a contributor to the work. And alhamdulillah, it's just I'm just extremely proud of you and what you've done.
And thank you so much for being so gracious, because I was very blessed to be able to talk with so many women who have experienced this. I had to, break it down to 5 case studies. I'm one of the case studies, but I could have had 100. I could have had 100 men. And so I definitely had to get a lot of, support and patience from the women I interviewed, because they were still, experiencing trauma. And sometimes we had to stop the interviews because of their trauma. And so we had, they were gracious with me, and I had to, of course, be gracious with them and come on their time. But I definitely thank you, for speaking with me about this topic. And I hope that you all get the book and reach out to me. Let me know how you feel about it, what you think about it. And then maybe, you can give me some thoughts, for part 2.
I definitely will. And remember, all of my beloved folks who, I know a lot of people were really interested in this because they're currently going through a time. They're currently going through heartbreak. They're currently going through this particular situation. And I just, want to advise everybody to take care of that delicate vessel. And remember Allah often. One of the things that gave me a lot of solace and continue to give me solace is that Allah is sufficient for me. And I say that over and over, even when I doubt it, even when I'm not in the best spiritual state. I say it enough and enough and enough. And it gives the heart an incredible rest, and it takes care of that heart, that vessel. So remember to just take care of that vessel. It's delicate. It's sacred. It's something that it's a trust between you and your creator. We're not supposed to just give it away to any old raggedy body. So that's my last piece and last bit of advice. Sis Kaleema, do you have a final word for, I guess, just those who are going through a time?
I want to say, to please remember that it's your voice. Your voice is your power. You have to speak up. When some of those butterflies, you think, oh, I'm having butterflies, because no, the butterflies are your warning signal. Listen to your own inner voice. You already know when this person means you no good, but you just have to trust yourself listen to yourself and act on it, and move away from these people that are giving you these feelings that you can't explain. Move away so you can try to unpack it and understand, what am I actually feeling right now? And that's what we don't do. But if you do that, you can do a lot, in the way of protecting yourself, and being able to use your own voice, your outer voice to say no, your inner voice to say, I need to unpack this and figure out why I'm feeling this way.
SubhanAllah. Thank you. That's very beautiful advice. May
Well,
Allah bless you, Sister Kaleema. May Allah increase you. May He put a lot of barakah in your work, and may it reach the masses and help those who need the help and support. Thank you guys for tuning in. I love you guys radically. Continue to share this podcast. Continue to like it on all of our platforms. We want to thank you for tuning in to the Adult Muslim Woman podcast, and we hope you have a very good night. Assalamu alaikum.
wa alaikum salam.